Now let's move on to our next set of discussion on nurturing and building women leadership at grassroots levels. See, identifying potential leaders at a very early age and nurturing them for leadership are the most critical part of building women leadership. Then comes the time and the kind of support it requires. To chat more on this, like to encourage women leadership at grassroots levels, we have a panel of distinguished guests with us, starting from Mr. Amit Gujral, who is the Chief Marketing Officer, JK Tyre and Industries Limited. Welcome, Mr. Amit. We have with us Ms. Deepshika Dharmraj, Chief Executive Officer, Genesis BCW. Along with them, we have Ms. Sarika Naik, Chief Marketing Officer, Chairperson Diversity and Inclusion, Capgemini India. Welcome, ma'am. We have with us Ms. Vasuta Agarwal, Managing Director, Asia Pacific InMobi. And last but not the least, we have with us Ms. Priya Jayaraman, who is the co-founder, 9 Yards Communications Consultancy, who will be conducting this interesting chit-chat. Over to you, Priya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful to have you all here this afternoon for a great panel discussion. I have with me 4 stalwarts from various sectors in the corporate India, and today we'll be talking about nurturing and building women leadership at grassroots levels. A very, very pertinent subject, and something that's much debated and much talked upon. Not just debated and talked upon, but we're also seeing today significant action across making this happen and making this a vision for various organizations in the way they are opening up opportunities, changing policies, giving more visibility to women across ranks to ensure that their growth path is set in their careers. And what we'll do today is over the next 45 minutes hear from Sarika, hear from Amit, hear from Deepshika and Vasuta on everything that we can speak about as far as the subject is concerned. Looking forward to a very engaging 45 to 50 minutes of conversation, and I'll start with something that will actually open up this for further conversation is what are some of the very important what are some of the challenges, and challenges may have been different for each one of you over time when you have observed what happens at grassroots levels within your own organization and through your growth path. What are some of the challenges when it comes to identifying potential women leaders and encouraging them? I will start this with Sarika. Would love to hear your point of view on this, and then we'll take it from there.
So thank you, and thank you, Adgully, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this very pertinent topic. And there is good news and not so good news over the last couple of years. The good news is that the women participation, both at the junior levels and at leadership levels, has been increasing. In fact, what I recently read is that we have an all-time high of number of women at CEO positions. We have 41. Among the Fortune 500 companies. But the bad news is that's still only 8%, so where are all the women leaders, and if we were to just take a look at, what are the components that go into building a leadership pipeline for women? It's not a magic wand that you can wave one day and suddenly transform a person into a leader. Somebody overnight to look at things very differently. So it really is a very long, ongoing process. When you ask me specifically, Priya, about my own journey, to be very honest, I joined from a tier 2 city into a conventional sales job. And, the first thing that I was asked is, you're going to be the only woman in channel sales. And are you sure you're not getting married in 2 months' time? Because we spend a lot of time in training people, and, we wouldn't want to lose somebody there. So some of the very common challenges that we have faced is around stereotyping. It is the kind of roles that are open to women. And it's also this assumption that women are there just for a job and not really for a career. The good news again in this is that things have changed. I'm talking to you something that happened 2 decades ago. Today, when we hire and we talk to people, and I must tell you, the new generation is really it's really very interesting talking to them. When I interview a lot of young people today, the women are very clear that they're not looking only for a job; they're looking at a career. They want to know who are the role models in the organization that they can look up to and aspire to be there. Frankly, when I joined 2 decades ago, there were hardly any women leaders where I could say, hey, I want to aspire there. So that's the other challenge, that there are very few people at that time. Of course, that's changed dramatically now, and there are a lot more women leaders across industries, technology, and you have so many of them here on this panel. So I would say that stereotyping, the fact that there is a lot more of assumptions when it comes to women and what they want. I think these would be broadly the challenges. I would love to throw this more open to my other colleagues as well, so that we get a lot more of ideas from
Yeah,
across the
yeah,
board.
absolutely. So it's great that you're saying that some of the challenges are, of course, stereotyping and the fact that they're looking, they're cast in a job, and that there may be a lot more to it, but it's still typecast in something that, perhaps is what is assumed and understood. It could be because of, the stage of life they're in, or assume that they have multiple responsibilities at the time when they're growing up and not just focus on career, perhaps. Maybe let's just talk about it a little more. What do you think, Vasuta?
Yeah, so I think Sarika rightly, talked about the stereotyping issue, right, which comes in. I mean, not as much now, but it was definitely there. A couple of years, I would say, even a decade back in different industries. I would say, a couple of more challenges. Just adding to that is at an organizational level. See, one of the challenges which comes when you're trying to identify women, at least what I've personally experienced, is that sometimes women themselves hold back, right? So whenever there is, let's say, a tough role or a new challenge or a new program, what I've observed is a lot of times, women are uncomfortable putting their hand up for it, and asking for that new challenge or that new role. And I've actually had situations where I've had to go and nudge people on the side and say, why don't you give this a shot, right? Or why don't you put your hand up for this? So I think there is, apart from the organizational side, even from the individual side, there is, sometimes this hesitation, this holding back, which creates challenges, right? Because if, as an individual, I don't step forward for an opportunity or a new challenge, then the organization at times may not even know about the person's interest or, capability even, right? So I do think that adds to the set of challenges in identifying leaders among women, identifying high potential folks. And then I think, as Sarika also talked about, these life events, right? Marriage, pregnancy, all of these things. I think, especially in India as a society, these are life-changing events for people, right? And a lot of times, when people think that, okay, I'm going to be doing this in the next 6 months or 12 months, again, they start, holding themselves back. Because of whatever reasons, right? There is obviously society and family pressures, and then you also think that you may not be able to meet the organizational demands in your after a life event. So again, I think those things also at times hold people back. And again, that creates a challenge from an organizational side, that how do you support these life events better, right, for women, so
Right.
that you are not sort of losing out on high potential candidates and individuals because of some of these things. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's what I think.
No, no, totally. I hear you. So you're saying that it's not just about, there's, of course, there's life events and all of this, but there's also a sense of discovery and self-worth, if I were to say so, at that level. And how do you have to outperform your own role to perhaps grow and make it to the top? Can we take a little, a shot at that? And I'll speak to Amit. Amit, your sector is a very interesting one, and what happens, first of all, is there even a good balance at the grassroots level in organizations such as yours? It'd be great if you can throw some light and also talk about the challenges that you face in being in such a sector and kind of an organization.
Thank you so much, Priya, for the question. And first of all, thanks to Adgully for having me on this panel among some distinguished ladies as my colleagues here. The sector, as you mentioned, I think it should not be a question here. There are certain stigmas and there are taboos which we heard from even Sarika and Vasuta as well. Certain things, those taboos are developed by society. and certain stigmas are done by the women themselves, as very rightly put by Vasuta. So, however, we got to understand one thing, that it is all driven by, if I talk about industry, we got to closely observe the construct of the industry itself. Typically in our country called India, there are till about late 90s and early 2000s, it was all orthodox businesses which were ruling the roost. Now, when we say orthodox, it is an orthodox society who had picked up certain businessmen. They were doing their businesses in a very, very stereotyped manner. They need hardworking, leg working, and a guy only can do it. Let me put it very simply. Okay. Then came liberalism. Then our economy developed. We started seeing some new businesses led by some new people, the youngsters. Now, as the complete society or as a nation, we have been evolving, our thought processes have also been changing. Yes, as Sarika mentioned, possibly 8% of the CEOs, why not 18%? The process is slow, but process has begun. Let me put it that way. Today, a woman, I'm sure all of you being ladies, you know it very well, you are in every field of walk of life. Space, technology, medicine, sports, industry, XYZ, everywhere you are there. Not in many numbers though. I said because again, the stigmas done by ladies themselves and the taboos prevailing. So the situation, as I said, is changing slowly and it's a welcoming change. You know why? As a gender called female, we are known to be more empathetic. And empathy is something which is an integral phenomenon every professional should have, whether in sales, whether in marketing, whether in R&D, whether in XYZ things, whatever they are doing, because we all in the profession actually are serving our customers in one or the other way. And serving customers, I think the biggest DNA required is empathy, and female gender is known to be more empathetic. So at positions, at leaderships, we got to understand which are the opportunities, where this phenomena of being female is best served. And I think we must create opportunities and we must create roles for that. So irrespective of industry, I don't define any blockages in terms of one industry you can work, another industry you can't work. Not really. You're most welcome. That's how I would like to say that.
Lovely, lovely. I think this is a very interesting point, is the fact that acceptance of gender and women as a business issue, right? That itself is such a very important part. And how do we keep this issue and keep this challenge of, leadership development of women on the business agenda, and make sure that we sufficiently, whether we monitor statistics around participation, performance through various assessment programs. I mean, that's a challenge, right? We'll come to the solutions, but lovely point that, acceptance of this is an issue and therefore monitoring it and doing what's needed is super critical. I'll take this to Deepshika at this point because it'll be interesting to hear your point of view, Deepshika, especially as challenge, right? What do we do to make a woman's voice at a grassroots level more heard? Is that a challenge? And what do you think about it, given that you come with this background of making voices heard and making stories be seen?
Yes, thank you, Priya. And I think all of them have said a lot and so relevant. So I was just thinking, God, I have to have a different point of view, but I think I will add more because, and Vasuta touched upon it, Amit talked about it, and so did Sarika. I think one of the things which stands out most is the lack of role models. One of the biggest challenges across industries is, do we have enough women leaders who can be role models? And Amit talked about the 90s liberalization, and there are many more women out there today. So I think that's the first and foremost. How do we celebrate the women role models as leaders? I think the more we invest in bringing out their stories, and I'm in the business of communication, and I think it's important for businesses like us to bring out more of these success stories and talk about these role models, because when other women see these role models, their stories, hear about their challenges, how they overcame their own challenges, it gives them inspiration, right? It allows them to dream bigger. It allows them to aspire. And there are many more such role models today. While, okay, in India, we still say 8% women CEOs, but it's delightful to see across industry sectors where women are going up the leadership chain, right? And more younger women are looking up to them and learning from them. A conversation like this itself, I think, will inspire so many more young women who are going to begin their professional career and start thinking about how should they react to a stereotype. How will they break the bias in the organization they go into? How will they choose the right kind of organization? And I think these are some of the tough questions that women will need to answer. You don't just look for a job. And I think one of our colleagues talked about this earlier, that you don't just look for a job, you look for a career. So you look for an organization which is going to give you that career, even though you're a woman, and maybe actually celebrate the fact that you're a woman. You have many more additional qualities that you bring to the table. One of the other big things I think organizations should really think about is, are there adequate mentoring programs? We don't give enough importance to mentoring programs in organizations. And that's, for me, very often the make or break in. So you said, how do you identify this women leadership potential talent? And it's true. I mean, at a certain level, it's pretty much similar. And to be able to distinguish between man and woman, apart from who has more work hours and who puts in more energy, who takes more leave, who's asking for more flexibility, and those then start becoming the stereotypes and the biases. But if you get into almost structured mentoring programs for women who show potential, you can actually start developing that potential pretty early. You can be there to handhold them and support them through that journey. Because we all know, and I have to be honest, I come from an organization where I've had wonderful women leaders. And, I was fortunate to have been mentored by some of the best in the industry. And I know the value of that. There were many of these life-changing moments in my life where I said, oops, maybe I should step back, and I'm not sure I can do that leadership role. And there was always a mentor who stepped in at that time and say, challenge yourself, have a growth mindset, think about the opportunities that you can create for yourself, and also think about what you can do for the others in your team who are going to face similar kind of challenges. So I think these are some of the things that we should be looking at. How do we create and celebrate more women role models in organizations? How do we set up mentor programs where we are able to identify some of these young women leaders at an early stage, and then help them and handhold them in their journey to grow further, which all then sort of puts together a more enabling culture in an organization. So it's not about just giving it speak, but actually walking the talk and having very clear, if I can call it, culture-driven initiatives in the organization to be able to promote this.
Fabulous. Great, Deepshika. Also the fact that half the journey begins in identifying the challenges, right? Because once we do that,
Right.
the solutions automatically emerge. And whether it is lack of mentorship, perhaps in the way we see it, whether it's in the lack of opportunities, whether it's in the lack of voices being heard or being stereotyped in a particular role, the challenges are plenty, and there's a huge road to move ahead. That brings me to another aspect of this discussion, where we're talking about how do we both nurture and build women at grassroots level. I think given all of you would have interviewed, spoken, succession planned, and also met various people, spotted them from non-traditional roles, just the sheer experience. What are those key qualities that you look for while you plan out what has to be their way forward? If you could talk about, some of the initiatives that you may have done, but key qualities, things that you would look for and try to spot at a very grassroots level, and at a very perhaps mid to junior level talent as well as they grow. Vasuta, why don't you share some light on this?
Okay, I think that's a very pertinent question, right, in the context of this discussion, especially as we talk about identifying and grooming talent in the early sort of stages of their careers. So, I think what's key is really, at least what I think I look at, or as an organization, is I think a lot of it is around the attitude of the person more than I would say just pure play skills, right? Because skills can still be taught to a good extent, right? But I think attitude really defines a person, because that's something that stays with them, and it's not changeable in a lot of ways or teachable, right? So I think attitude, and then of course things like smarts and competence and so on come after that. But I think attitude is very, very critical, and I think you get to know that about a person early on, right, with a few interactions, a few projects, some of the things that they start to do. I think in addition to that, I mean, again, because I've been at my current organization for a decade, so a lot of the values by which we define our leaders or assess our leaders, right, I think are again quite important, right? So, for example, things like one big one for us is ownership and accountability, because making the ability to make something happen, right, becomes increasingly important as you grow up the ladder, right? So in spite of obstacles and challenges, if you're able to own and be accountable, right, for the things not just you're doing, but as you grow, for what your team does, right, what your business does, and so on. So ownership and accountability, again, I feel is a very important quality, and that you can start to see in the early days of someone's career, as they start out with small initiatives, small tasks, and so on. So I think attitude, ownership, accountability, and I think it's difficult to probably assess this right on, but also I think just how bold and ambitious an individual is, their ability or capacity to take risks. Because again, I'm talking about things which are important, as you grow up the ladder. So this one's difficult to identify early on, but again, it's something that we look at, as a quality. So these are a few that I talk about. Of course, there's more that you look at as, an individual grows stage by stage.
Great. Yeah. Attitude, accountability, all of this go a long way. And I think a lot of it also is in the value systems that, we as leaders believe in. And how do you want to then start seeing some of them in the way people are looking beyond themselves as individuals, but also grow within the organization, right? Both personally and professionally. Sarika, your thoughts on this?
Actually, very difficult to add anything to what Vasuta said, because frankly, I resonate with all of them. In fact, I think what I will just highlight, because all that she said is important. That's exactly what I look at really when I'm looking at building my leadership pipeline. The most important one stood out for me is ambition. There has to be this ambition to be somebody beyond just being a sister, mother, friend, etc., etc. So I think that ambition is the driving force. And I have had some wonderful examples within my own team. Very, very young, capable people, women, perhaps from tier 2 cities. But the ambition and drive to prove who they are and to contribute and stand up for who they are has been so strong that in fact today they are leading some of the they're doing roles which are like 2 levels higher than their current grade, and doing a phenomenal job. So I think it doesn't really matter after a point what pedigree you come from. It's important which schools you went, which town you came. It's important in a sense that it helps you start a little early, at a little advanced level. But it's really the ambition, it's the attitude. And one piece which I will add is integrity. You did say, Vasuta, values, but I do believe that, especially in today's world, integrity, your awareness and being inclusive, looking at, beyond just yourself and, beyond your entity, looking at the enterprise, looking at the society, those are a little difficult to gauge at a very young age, but those are the ones that really you will see the sparks at an early age, and those are the ones which will take you to a leadership level. So, My first point would be, my biggest pick would be ambition, integrity, and really the alignment to values.
Absolutely fabulous. Amit, over to you.
Now, I would just like to sum this up, what Vasuta spoke and what Sarika spoke, and would love to talk about, especially women here, on these values. We talk about the aspects like integrity, ownership, accountability. I think all this is gender agnostic. But where does a woman has an edge on these parameters? इतिहास गवाह है, घर की रखवाली, घर की देख रेख is all majorly known to be by a woman. Who can be more accountable for the home than a lady? Who takes the so-called ownership of growing their kids more comparatively, a mom or a dad? So if we look into these qualities we look for people, I think there are certain specific areas where they score over other parameters. You need to have a bit more of accountability, bit more of ownership. And I think women score slightly over men on these aspects. So as professionals, when we look for solving a business issue or a business problem or taking out some task, I think the onus has to be on us as to who are the best performers, irrespective of gender there. But I personally feel that on these particular parameters, if these are your asks for the particular job, I think an ambitious, integral woman will score over than a man.
Superb.
I don't know what Sarika says about this.
No, I agree that what you said about the qualities that we were referring to, Vasuta and myself, really they are gender agnostic. Somehow, either it is the cultural fabric that we come from, or the society, whichever ways you want to put it. Somehow these are not the qualities which are associated with women in India very easily.
No, Sarika, this is what I was referring to in my earlier dialogue. That is the stigma self-coined, or you have learned from society?
I would say it's both, because really you learn what is around
you. Exactly. Hence I say that all the women who already are in the establishment at any possible position or role has more onus of trying to dilute that stigma among other women colleagues.
Absolutely. Agree. Couldn't agree more, because that's your payback. Absolutely in sync on that.
Yeah.
I want to add here, and I think the whole bit about being gender agnostic on qualities of leadership is extremely important. And if I may, Amit, it's not only the women leaders' responsibility to challenge some of these stigmas. I think it's equally the men leaders' responsibilities to challenge these stigmas in their organizations, right? I would love to see more men stand up and say, why are we saying women are like this? And therefore, only women, or maybe women, will make better at this job. I think that itself, I have to say, it hassles me, because I think all jobs should be equally open to men and women. And women should have the equal opportunity to be able to showcase their skills, their qualities, and how they deal with it. And I think that's where I believe the biggest thing is, where men and women need to think with an open mindset, and more, I recently I've been reading a lot on this growth mindset concept, and that for me is what leadership should be looking at. How are you curious? How are you creative? How are you open-minded? How are you a problem solver? And I think it's equally open for men and women. And to your point, you're very right, Amit. I think very often women are possibly not given that opportunity to come out into a workspace and demonstrate some of these other skill sets. Right. And we go with the classical ones of women are multitaskers, women are more empathetic.
As I said, things are changing for the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's people like us.
Changing.
Right. And I think it's leaders like us to actually, honestly, whenever somebody says, oh, I'm not sure, or actually trying to be positive and inclusive and saying, oh, a woman leader would be so good for this position. And I would actually challenge that. Why would you say woman leader? Let's evaluate the candidate, right? For the kind of skills and what the candidate brings to the table. So let's look at it irrespective of gender. And I know we're going to come to that conversation of, at an organizational board level, what should we be doing? And while there is a reservation for a certain number of women percentage to be on boards, and which is great, but I would actually like us to reach a stage in India and globally also where we don't need to have a reservation. Women should be deserving enough to be in that space, right? And I think that's the journey we have to cover as leaders, of being more inclusive, break the biases and stereotypes and say, why should you have reservation? Women should be accepted and evaluated for a role or a job as much as any other gender. And I think it goes today, honestly, beyond man, woman, gender also. We're looking at a much wider definition of inclusion and diversity. And that will be the future of people.
And it's very interesting point you said, Deepshika, about the reservation. And just to add, I'm sure each one of us spoken to a lot of women leaders, and none of them have reached where they have because of reservation. They've all reached there because despite of no reservation, they were able to break it. And none of the women today really want to be on the reservation quota. So great point, Deepshika.
I think only one point that I
would just like to compliment on what Deepshika spoke just a while ago, and there's a few lines in Hindi, if I'm allowed to talk about it.
Of course.
Today, yes. I think we are talking about encouraging, having more participation of women, and I'm saying of the opinion that the self stigma should be removed from the ladies. Okay.
Absolutely.
So few lines. तू खुद की खोज में निकल, तू किस लिए हताश है, तू चल, तेरे वजूद की समय को भी तलाश है, समय को भी तलाश है, जो तुझसे लिपटी बेड़ियां समझना इनको वस्त्र तू, जो तुझसे लिपटी बेड़ियां समझना इनको वस्त्र तू, ये बेड़ियां पिघाल के बना ले इनको शस्त्र तू, बना ले इनको शस्त्र तू खुद की खोज में निकल, तू किस लिए हताश है, तेरे वजूद की समय को भी तलाश है, समय को भी तलाश है.
Nice. Wow.
I think we should have, I hope you have one more poetry left for the end of our conversation, because this will be lovely to, also close the panel with. But one small point that I'd like to make, I think one of the qualities that I was also thinking of is, is collaboration physiologically, right? While we would not put any gender layer on it, but because women are different as such, right? So collaboration is a key skill set that at least I would really look for in a lot of leaders, given that we're becoming more and more, technology driven as a race. Right. It needs somebody to bring back the humanness in workforces. It needs somebody to bring back a very supportive style of working. And when women combine such, invaluable assets that they have to fuel, whether it's leadership positions or, make a mark in their workplace, I think the organization itself will see significant growth. And that's perhaps a trait that I would also look for. On that note, I think I'll also open it up for, now that we know who we're looking for and how we kind of are taking this discussion forward from a nurturing and empowering point of view, what is there a time frame to this? Is there a typical time that women take to groom into leadership roles? Is there a journey that they have to go through? So at one end we talked about mentoring and programs, visibility within organizations, mapping, or giving them that that the flow of the river. But is it cast in time, given that this is the same time when careers are made, women are also building their personal lives. How does this all pan out? So I'm really putting this out there open for all of us, is what is the time that it takes to groom a woman manager, and how do you in your own capacity chart out these growth plans? Anyone? I think why don't we start with Deepshika?
I was actually going to jump in because one of the things we do at Genesis BCW is actually put growth plans for not just women but also men. It's a annual process of charting out what is your growth plan, and this discussion on what is your aspiration, how do you want to grow and develop. And as part of the discussion, often we do have conversations about what kind of support do you need in that growth plan, right? Because while I may say, okay, I want to be a CEO in the next 10 years, which is a great, good growth plan when we work out the steps. But more importantly, what are the support that you require both at a workspace point of view as well as at a home point of view? And again, to your question, Priya, or your comment that this is also the time frame typically between the 25 to 30, 40s when a woman is building her personal life, is getting married, having children. Well, so is the man actually. He's also getting married and having children. So again, this brings me to the bit about why should it be gender specific. I think that the biggest support systems, the biggest key is building support systems. How can we enable our people with a growth plan, or first charting out their growth plan, and once they've charted out their growth plan, how do we help them build that support system? So at the workplace, some of these support systems can be flexibility at work, being able to give them the right kind of team support and the kind, what require flexibility to be able to manage the multiple roles in their lives. And then when it comes to the home place, and there's this whole campaign which is running on share the load, and it is so pertinent, right? At home also, both the man and the woman need to build the right kind of support systems. And I have to say, we are very fortunate in India. We have access to some wonderful support systems, whether it's grandparents, whether it's extended families, and of course our help at home. We're able to identify some of the support systems who can be part of this journey. I can tell you, in my journey of the last 30 years of becoming a woman leader, I every day celebrate the support system I've got at work and at home, without which I wouldn't be able to do what I do. I think these are some of the things we should watch out for and help people with. So have a clear growth plan, chart out what are the steps that you need to do, which could be adding some professional development as you go along and adding some more learning and knowledge. And of course, how do you get the right kind of support systems, even in your personal life, to be able to take that journey forward?
Yeah, so playing an active role in creating out that support system and being part of those discussions, despite who it is in the organization, I totally second, is supremely critical. What have been your experiences, Vasuta, Sarika?
Yeah, so I think Deepshika made a very important one, right? So I think your question was, what's the time frame, right, to groom a leader? And I think
Yes.
this one really is gender agnostic, right? Because this actually depends on what a person's, say, capacity is, what their own aspiration is. See, one part I think maybe we should keep in mind always that everyone has different ambitions and aspirations, right, for their own career. So I would say, in addition to the support system aspect, right, at least when we're looking at growth plans, one thing we also ask people is to define sort of what is their super you version of themselves, right? That who would they want to be both on a professional and a personal level in whatever 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, right? And then create that support system like Deepshika talked about around that, journey. Because I mean, not everyone wants to be, say, a CEO, right? Someone may want to, say, to go do their own startup in a few years, right? Or someone may want to just take a break for a year, right? So everyone has different aspirations. And I find that growth plans to support those aspirations with the right support system, right, is what tends to work best, right? Because then you're also, I mean, the individual is in the driver's seat in that case, right? And then the organization is trying to support that, right? It's an ideal state, honestly. It doesn't work out with everybody, but at least that's what we try to do.
Yeah, I'd like to build on this with a different take, So first and foremost, I think the journey is continual. There is no 1 year or set of years when suddenly a woman feels ready for a very leadership position. And, I agree with Vasuta, not everybody wants to be or can be a CEO. It's what is your ambition and how do you allow, how does the, organization support that? So it's very specific to an individual. There's one piece that I'd like to pull out rather than, repeat what they said is, many times it's okay to take a break in a career. And that's something that we should start accepting. And, like Deepshika said, while the woman is getting married, she's having children, so is the man, But then, it's just a structure around us that sometimes it's okay to take a break for a year, 2 years, provided the organization has the ability to bring you back into the fabric and get you on par. So programs like, the, comeback program, and I'm sure all organizations have that. We have a very, very strong program. It's called Captivate at Capgemini, where we encourage women who have taken a career break for, a certain, fulfilling whatever their, personal career, life decisions are. And, it's not just opening roles which are the peripheral roles. It's opening key roles which will take them to build a career. And it's not just opening the roles and saying, okay, come on, and then, lead them to failure. It is making sure that they are trained enough. They have the skills. Let's say 2 years break, technology changes overnight nowadays, So there is a program which helps them skill up, before they join, so that when they actually join, they don't feel inferior or lesser than any of the other peers than them. Also, the same program helps them with buddies or friends who will help them settle in the organization. It's quite unnerving nowadays when we've been off from office for 2 years, right? So when many of us are looking forward to getting back, for some it can be quite an intimidating thing that you've been away from work, you don't know the new generation, they're talking things you don't know. So a buddy that will help them settle back into the informal channels of the organization, that is a complete program that organizations should drive. Of course, like I said, we have a very, very strong, and we've seen tremendous results from this program called Captivate. I think more and more accepting that there can be a career break, but providing an environment for them to come back would help them stay on course for a leadership journey.
Yeah, fabulous. I think Amit, I'd put this question to you slightly differently. Is while we're talking about not necessarily having a time frame, and if opportunities exist for them to come back, then that should definitely be the case. But what about fast tracking, right? What about how quickly can a young individual in any organization, if they want to become a leader, or if we see that they can, are there any roadmaps or paths there? Because while each one's decision can drive the course, are there fast tracking channels as well available? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to say about that?
No, certainly yes. We are in an ever-changing technological environment, right? So we need talent who actually goes beyond the defined limits and boundaries and embraces himself or herself with the newer concepts, newer phenomena, new technologies, newer laws, and is definitely encouraged and also identified in the system to fast track, for sure. See, today we are in a new age. Businesses itself are in a new age. We want people who are agile, who are absolutely looking forward to contribute as the first, irrespective of what their levels have been in the system. Of course, yes, hierarchies do play a vital role in organizations, Nobody's asking you to bypass the hierarchies, but there are opportunities, there are programs, there are systems in place to identify such talents and bring them up the ladder, bring them into critical roles, and do as what we say as fast tracking. There are development programs being carved out to identify those talents in the early stages, put them into those specific programs because we know that they possess the ability and they can be value add and much quicker than some of the old talent which has been prevailing. So I think all organizations today are looking to fast track such talents.
Fabulous. I think we have a good 15 minutes to sort of wrap this with, with our concluding question for the day, which sort of will summarize a lot of what we spoke about, but also very interesting is all this, right? Or the kind of support that we really need to give women, and diversity is really increasing. Board number of board seats have increased for 5% female CEOs, which is an encouraging start, though there's a long way to go. What is really, what is the responsibility of the board, if I may say so, and what does it take? What is the support that we can expect to encourage diversity at leadership positions and encourage women leaders and give them that confidence to take that mantle? I'll open it up for all.
Okay, maybe I'll start off, and then I'm sure everybody will have jump in. So I think one of the biggest things that a board can create is an environment in the organization where people feel valued and heard and listened to. And I think that would go across whether it's for women leaders or even male leaders and so on. So if you encourage diversity, inclusion, conversations around that, it's something that the board needs to not just have as, and apologies for this, it's not just about having a policy. Very often organizations will say, we have a policy which is about diversity and inclusion. I think it's about pulling it out from policy and making sure it permeates through the organization and they demonstrate that themselves, and being open to having different points of view, perspectives, and having open conversations where people feel valued and heard. And the second thing I would say is, this journey is not something that can happen overnight. Like, today everybody is talking about DEI and having the right kind of culture in the organization. It's not a 1 or a 2 year journey. This is a long-term journey. It's going to take 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. So be patient and be willing to invest yourselves in that journey. I think that's what a board should really, the role that they should play to make this happen.
Yep, totally agree. Anyone else?
Well, I'll be happy to build on that and say that, yes, it has to be beyond just policy, but more of a practice. And it should be something where it's not something that you need to discuss any longer. Deepshika, I think you only mentioned it earlier about reservation. So, sometimes there are these discussions, we are celebrating, let's say, XX thing, we are launching a certain policy for DNI. Ideally, it should be, the board sets an environment where, this is part of the organization fabric. So you don't have to discuss it separately. You don't have to implement special rules for it. It is actually within the fabric of the organization. The other thing that I would say is lead by example, because there are lots of people who are looking up to the board in terms of how they deal with things. So for example, if you're saying that we are committed to an inclusive organization, but when you look at the board and you look at the leadership, they all look the same, they wear the same thing, they eat the same food, then it's just something which is a brand promise which is not implemented. So lead by example. So when they say, no, when you give somebody else something to eat it first yourself. So whatever policies, practices make sure that the board embodies that in letter and spirit. One of the things that I've always it's an interesting introspection for a lot of leaders, to do that. How many of the leaders themselves, when they're looking at the succession plan, really have at least one woman leader in their succession plan by design? It's not because the HR is standing on your side and asking you to do it, but How have you identified, and do you have at least one woman leader who is part of that succession plan? May not be ready today, may be ready in 2 years, 3 years, but that is something that the board could do. And last, I would say, have zero tolerance for something which is, not aligned to the ethos of the organization when it comes to women. So, have zero tolerance policies when it comes to anything which is related to grievances or, behavior that is unacceptable or discriminatory. Make sure that, of course, you keep anonymity of the names, but make sure that the organization knows that where you stand as far as such things. So I would sum it up in that way.
Yeah, I would just add, I think I think both Sarika, Deepshika covered most of the points. And I think the culture and the environment aspect is very, very important, right? Creating that culture or that DNA in an organization, right, from the top down is extremely critical, because then everybody understands, the importance of something. And again, I think the lead by example one is, of course, actual role models whom, women can look up to. But also, I mean, a lot of times we talk about these policies and programs, but what's actually happening on the ground on those policies and programs, right? Like when we talk about, for example, childcare or support system for looking after children, do you have a support system, say, on the campus, right? Or are you giving flexible work options to women, right? So actually what is happening in terms of implementation of the policies and programs, I think, and monitoring that even up to the board level, I think is an important element, right? To make sure that you're not just sort of doing lip service to some of this, and you're actually leading by example and actually walking the talk on these things. So I think that part is also very critical from a top-down sponsorship lens.
Correct. It's also, I think, a familiarization, right? It's important that, given that the percentage uh, of diversity is not so high and it's growing only year by year, it's important that there is that familiarization created in the board environment also, to onboard a new board member, especially, or to grow into, or for a board to also give that position of power to a woman leader, right? And see them through that, right? How do they, to some extent, be that we've got your back, and empower them to therefore perform to their abilities. So that's just one part. Amit, anything you'd like to add?
I think having heard such wonderful thoughts from the women leader here, I would like to answer your original question by a simple poetry by Shailendra Chauhan. आया समय उठो तुम नारी, युग निर्माण तुम्हें करना है, प्रगति की खुदी नींव में तुम्हें प्रगति पथ भरना है, अपने को कमजोर न समझो, जननी हो संपूर्ण जगत की, गौरव हो अपनी संस्कृति की, आहट हो स्वर्णिम आगत की, तुम्हें नया इतिहास देश का, तुम्हें नया इतिहास देश का अपने कर्मों से रचना है. Thank you so very much.
I think on that note, it's a lovely, a summarization of the power that exists today, and how can we, really channelize it, harness it for not just corporate performance, but also, I think, contributing to GDPs, as they say, and if the gender gap is closed, right? Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for everyone being here. And I guess, we'll get back to our routines, and looking forward to catching up with you all eventually later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Nice being
much,
around.
Priya. That
Thank
was
you
really
so
nice.
much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Priya. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you to everybody else.
So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your insightful thoughts. That was really a wonderful discussion.